So we are live.
We are live. Yeah. So we
Just
want chit
waiting.
chat. So
Yeah.
Larry, it's another episode of Let's Talk Health Tech, and today it's really your show a little bit. Today we're going to talk about OpenAI's breach and what that means, and it's reminiscent of the Change Healthcare breach from years ago. So
Breach breaches.
why don't you give listen to the Change Healthcare is like from 2024, right? But this one, the OpenAI thing, is it's kind of the canary in the coal mine sort of thing, wouldn't you say? It's like a warning for us, in the tech world.
So is that what canary in the coal mine means? That's a new one for me.
Okay,
You kind of lost me.
when miners used to go into the mines, they keep canaries in a cage, and if the canary died, they knew there was methane gas or some sort of
Mm.
gas. And the reason why gas smells in the right when you in your kitchen or whatever is because they add a smell to the gas, because gas doesn't naturally have a smell, certain gases. And
Right,
so they
right.
add a smell so you can, but when you're down in the mines, they don't have that. And so if they'd see the canary in the cage dead, they knew they had to get the hell out of there.
Wow. I feel
So
sorry
that's
for
so
the
it's like a
canary.
warning. It's a warning. It's a sign. So
So,
this OpenAI thing is a sign.
man, I don't even know if we would call it a sign, but just another indicator that
Yeah,
third parties are the primary cause of breaches in healthcare, and
yeah,
it's not going to stop.
yeah,
And it's I'll dive a little bit about why they're targeted later, but yeah, it's just another signal, man. If I would we wouldn't have enough time in a week if I went through all of the third party breaches that happened in a week. It's so many, it makes no sense. But yeah, OpenAI is another example of where they were involved. A part of one of their vendors were a part of a third party breach. So, in this case, they were affected. So I think the best thing to do is to, discuss and describe what went on with OpenAI. But before we do that, we would be doing our audience a disservice if we didn't introduce ourselves. So I'm going to let
oh,
you go first.
I'm Brendan McAdams. I'm sales coaching for health tech startups and sales consulting to health tech companies.
Guys, he's being modest. He's a master. He's an expert. He's built playbooks. He's being very modest. I'm Larry Trotter. I'm the founder of Inherent Security, and we help health tech companies with HIPAA and cybersecurity compliance. Now, go ahead.
So you were going to say that it's the breaches typically are third parties, and
Right.
ostensibly our audience is the third parties. They're the health tech vendors that are supporting. So I mean, this is going to be a big deal because health plans and health systems are going to get more and more strenuous and rigorous about
I
how
think
they
so.
evaluate. Right?
I think so, man. I think they're going to do more due diligence. We're seeing more literature, if you will, to help health systems secure their vendor ecosystems. But
Yeah.
I agree. That's one of my predictions for 2020. Probably, I feel like later 2026. I don't know why, but it's just a gut feeling. The later end of 2026, but definitely 2027, when we will see an uptick in more rigorous. What's the word I want to use? I guess more due diligence in terms of third party vendors.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually starting to see it a, a, a little bit now. I do some coaching and
Mhm.
mentoring with some of a couple accelerators, specifically health
There you go. Okay.
Techstars, right? And one of the companies in that that I got introduced to through that was an umbrella organization that tries to understand all the different AI solutions that are out there and how
Okay.
they interact. And so now you're just starting to see these kind of overarching architectures to kind of manage all the AI stuff that's out there. And I'm assuming, I mean, what drove this is OpenAI's breach, but I mean, it's beyond just AI. It's
Hmm.
everything. But you're certainly starting to see that sort of thing where if you've got an AI solution, a point AI solution, so to speak, you're pretty soon should expect that you're going to be underneath the umbrella of like some overarching architecture.
That makes a lot of sense, and you're right. I think AI really has propelled this even more
Yeah,
because governance is already on top of mind. And when
yeah,
we talk about governance, we're talking about bias, model training data,
yeah,
all of that stuff, right? And what happens when security, it gets sprinkled in within governance,
yeah.
but it really deserves a category of its own within governance. And we're not seeing that right now when we talk about the NIST AI risk frameworks. I'm not too sure about the ones overseas, but here within the United States. But AI security is its own thing. And the governance aspect is really going to, like you said, I think these institutions are really going to really hanker down more on it and dig a little bit deeper in terms if you coming to the table with the AI solution. And I feel like every health tech vendor is coming with the AI solution, or they're bolting it on their existing solutions. What have you seen?
To me it seems like it's really the Wild West. It's like,
Right.
right, it's like, damn the torpedoes right now. We're just trying to figure out what to, trying to be first. And in fact, next
Yeah.
week we're going to have another guest on, and he's going to talk about AI, from the AI and health tech, and the need to be first, and why being first is so important. And at the same time, you're rushing to be first, and how much of the infrastructure, the security infrastructure, is in place.
Right. And something about that, I don't think the mindset is correct to be first. I think especially in healthcare, I think you need to be right and really solve a problem. I
Right,
think that's where a lot of health tech vendors get wrong, is they solving something that is a nice to have, but it really isn't a problem that needs to be solved and really is beneficial to clinicians. We won't dig into that now, but I just had to, it would have hurt me not to say that. But to let everybody know, right, what this podcast is actually about, how it started off, right, is the OpenAI breach. So I'm going to dig a little bit, read a
yeah,
little bit
yeah,
about
spend a
what
minute. Yeah,
actually happened, right? So one of the third parties called Mixpanel was breached, and they are an analytics platform, and they're actually mature at
yeah,
that. So they're not an up and new coming company, right? They have
yeah,
some skin in the game, and they were breached, and of course they had to notify OpenAI, and OpenAI notified all of its customers. So on November 9th, 2025, Mixpanel became aware of an attacker that gained unauthorized access as part of their systems and exported a data set, right? They had limited customer identifiable information, and some of OpenAI's data was a part of that. So, as far as what it means for impact to users, users' profile information associated with the platform was taken. So, some of the identifiers are names that were provided to the API accounts, email addresses associated with the API accounts, approximate geolocations, API user browser data, operating systems, referring websites, and organizational user IDs associated with the API accounts. So what I did like about this is OpenAI immediately removed them from their production systems. Now I'm not sure if they're going to bring them back, but again, going into health tech, right? If you're the vendor and you are the major fallout for health system ecosystem, your reputation is going to be on the line, and they can do the same thing. They
right,
can, immediately remove you from their network, and it could be detrimental to your business, especially if you're a startup, because you've invested all of this money,
yeah,
angel investors and
yeah,
VCs as well, right?
right,
And to have all of those people lose their money because of a security breach, is
yeah.
not good.
And we saw this before with Change, right? With Change
Right.
Healthcare's
Oh
breach. I mean,
man.
man, when that, I mean, that really impact. I have a customer I'm working with right now, and that really clobbered him for a period of time, right, financially. And I mean, it did that for lots and lots of companies.
Oh man, some private practices actually went under. I'm sure you're aware
Yeah.
because of revenue cycles. They
Oh
weren't
yeah.
getting paid,
Oh
that
yeah.
sort of thing. There was such an uproar that I noticed. I live on LinkedIn. Where
Yeah.
private practices and people were talking about it. This was one of the craziest things, but I guess I don't know. It's chain of command. It doesn't really make sense to me, but the CEO was brought down to where he was testifying in front of
Yeah,
Congress. Do you remember that?
yeah,
And just he wasn't prepped at all by
yeah.
his CISO. When
Yeah.
I was listening to the responses, it would blew my mind. I was like, did they prep this guy? They just kind of like sent him out in the middle of the war with like a knife. Is
Hey,
what it seemed like.
but
Yeah, go ahead.
we all got free credit scoring and
Oh
security
God.
breach software.
I'm so over that. That was good like the first year that started happening, but after it was like it's really a slap in the face. And I
Oh,
heard
totally.
I think you know a little bit more about the you can speak you because you know more about the operations in terms of health systems than change healthcare, but I feel like a lot of the people didn't receive the money that they were supposed to change healthcare. Then people pay people out. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Well, it's part of United,
Yeah.
and I have the benefit of having worked for what was Change before it was Change. So I was at
Right.
Healthion, and Healthion Change really is a roll up of a whole bunch of companies. And
Okay.
so when I was at Healthion, that became WebMD. We merged with, basically bought WebMD, and then kept the name, and then we rolled up a whole bunch of other practice management systems and EDI companies and rev cycle management companies and the like. The biggest of which was Envoy, right? And Envoy is like, I don't know, by this point in time, it's got to be a like 40-year-old company, right? So this is EDI technology from, doing just 270s and 271s and whatever the other transactions are. Now I can't remember, 835s, 837, eligibility and all that sort of stuff. And those are basic old school EDI transactions. And even that was a bunch of roll ups of different companies. And so you've got this hairball of architecture that Change adopted. And to some degree, they, how much can you update and modernize this stuff, because it's running. It's a little bit like trying to repair an airplane while it's flying through the air, because these transactions are going nonstop. And how do you turn off transactions so you can upgrade systems? And so I think there were a lot of potential vulnerabilities in all these different systems,
Mm.
and yeah, and so I was part of all that. And then United has a reputation for not being the friendliest when it comes to their providers and so forth. So
Mm.
to some degree, I don't know how much empathy they, they have for. If they're
Did
great for
seem like a lot.
stockholders, they've been great for stockholders.
That's about right. So it's funny you mentioned that. Then I want to jump back into how this is relevant to health tech, but I've been a part of orgs that have went through mergers and acquisitions as well.
Yeah,
And you're right, when you're bringing on another entity's systems,
yeah,
security is one of those things that really is probably gets 10% of or less probably
it's
that
concrete, buddy. It's
as part of
concrete.
the strategy,
It's
right? Yeah,
concrete.
they think it's concrete, and they just bring these systems on, and it's hard to make that transition, or they never go back and actually make sure that everything is succinct and secure when the two organizations become one. So yeah, I could imagine when you consistently go through mergers and acquisitions like United Healthcare did, that you would have a lot of slippage, if you will, in terms
Yeah.
of having secure systems.
Yeah, you'd have to. So if you're analyzing those sorts of things, you probably have to look at the history of these companies and see how much of it is built from raw cloth. How much is made from raw cloth versus like a hodgepodge system that like Change is. I think one of the things that we have is an advantage for these new companies, new health tech companies. They're built on a much much more modern platforms, and a lot of this security stuff is sort of more inherent in them. Although I gotta wonder, like, how, when you talk to health tech companies, what's the likelihood that they think about security at the get-go?
You,
Do you know?
you beat me to it. I was really going to ask you that question because
Yeah,
I feel like you, for lack of a better phrase, well, I'm not going to use that phrase. You see them first,
yeah,
talk to them more likely. I would say 90% of the time first before I do. So I was going to ask you, do they talk about security part of as the whole sales process. But so I'll go first.
Sure.
When I usually see them, no, they're not right. They have some sort of security in place, but it's not as tight as it should be.
Yeah.
It's the mindset of we do the least amount that we can
Yeah.
just so we can, get a few
Right.
contracts in,
Yeah.
get some revenue coming in, and
Yeah.
then we'll work on it later. So
Yeah.
it's part their fault, but at the same time, it's part the health system's fault too.
Yeah.
Because if they were more rigorous in the beginning, that would be a trickle down effect for any health tech company, because they would realize, oh, when we build in this industry, we know that our compliance has to be, spot on,
Yeah.
better than good, for us to be able to sell.
Yeah.
But since that's not happening, we know we can do just enough to make it through the security teams.
Yeah. I think that the Change Healthcare thing in particular was a lesson for a lot of health plans and health systems, that I think they became more rigorous and have started to force that down upon any new vendor that they've got. So I think there's it's probably not as rigorous as it could. To your point, it's not as rigorous and as extensive as it could be, but you really can't do anything short of like some sort of sandbox pilot without a fair amount of security in place nowadays. I mean,
Okay.
it's just, it becomes one of those things that they go into and they examine PHI and, of course, HIPAA, of course, you can't avoid it. Now, how do they may not have that expertise in house. So how do they do that? How do they get that? They have to go to some outside vendor, or they go to some standard platform that kind of delivers that level of security for them, and they build on that platform. I don't know. That's you've seen one. You've seen one.
Right. Yeah. So usually the best case scenario during this whole ideation phase is
Yeah.
to understand that security is a very important part of your
Right.
product, and you
Right.
need to bring somebody in, make them a partner, whatever, to
Yeah.
have that baked in as you start from ground up. But
Yeah.
that's not what we really see. Everybody wants to go fast to be the first to market, kind of like you
Right.
talked about earlier. So what you really see is, in the beginning stages, is the developers, because you need developers. You don't need security, but you need developers.
You do. You do.
Right? They'll have the responsibility of security in the beginning, and they're not experts. They're just essentially, you're just piling on to their
Yeah.
jobs what they already
Yeah.
have, and leaving them with the responsibility. And when you see a little growth, usually the CIO or CTO starts taking that responsibility. But as they start growing, they say, "Whoa, I don't have time for this anymore." Right? So then at this stage, growth stage, usually companies I work with, 10 to 30 employees, is they work with someone like a VCISO like myself to augment their team,
Yeah.
or they use a GRC, governance, risk, and compliance solution to help augment security, but you still need the expertise
Yeah.
behind it to understand what's going on. And
Yeah.
when you're dealing with other security teams on the hospital end,
Yeah.
that you have to have somebody who speaks to it. It's funny, I had just was working with one of my clients past weekend, going through a security view. I mean, this guy was, they were crossing their T's, checking their eyes, because when I was looking at his responses to some of our questions,
Yeah.
he was saying some of the things were vague, and he was cross-checking things, and he was like, this doesn't make sense because you said this here, there. So, I was like, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. But
So
to your point,
that's actually like a sales opportunity, if you ask me. So one of the things I would say,
I'm glad you
what
said that.
one of the things I would say is, if you're an early stage startup, or you don't have that many customers, then I think one of the things you want to do is push early on conversations with IT,
Mhm.
and say, and even I would say during the discovery phase, say, you might even start by doing discovery with the IT department and say, hey, we're building this thing, and we'd like to vet it with you from a security standpoint. And that way the customers that you're going to run up against can tell you the sorts of things that they're expecting and that they're looking for. And so what you can do is start to uh, anticipate those through your discovery process. And so use your IT guys as uh, as a way to kind of learn more about what the product requirements will be from a security standpoint, because I mean, it's gonna. This is a this is going to be a big deal. I mean, and I think the Change Healthcare, Change Healthcare was a lesson for a lot of health plans and health systems. And I think this, to your point about this OpenAI breach, this is good. This is another example of, we can't stop thinking about this.
Right. And there's a few points I want to touch on. And I have a question for you.
Sure,
So
sure.
I love the aspect of leading with security essentially in the discovery. I wouldn't invite the IT team, I wouldn't invite them to look into the systems. But what
Yeah,
I would do is speak about it as part of my talking about my product. What this is
yeah,
what we're doing in terms of security, and then kind of getting that feedback, because
yeah.
usually when you do that,
Right.
they'll start asking more questions, and you're doing that discovery the
Yeah,
same way you're saying it, but just kind of in a, like a different a manner. But you're absolutely right with that. And you went okay. You went back again to the Change Healthcare and was talking about the
yeah,
ecosystems and stuff
yeah,
like that. Yeah, and it's what's so important about this OpenAI breach is because, as you mentioned, health tech companies are adding AI features to the products. Now,
yes,
let's be honest, 90% of them, probably 99% of them are just using API calls to platforms like OpenAI.
yeah.
Very
Right.
few are building LLMs or a model in-house because it's so expensive, and not only in
Oh, I
terms
don't
of.
know. We
Go
might
ahead.
have an argument there. So you want me to
Okay,
go
okay,
ahead?
okay.
So
Go
go
ahead, go
ahead.
ahead.
Finish your
Okay.
sentence.
So yeah, so when like if you're using, I'm going to say the majority of companies are going to use API calls, which is much cheaper and faster. So you have to really vet these AI vendors, your vendors as a health tech company, on who
Yeah,
you're doing business with. There's so many sprouting out. All of these companies, just like you, don't have security in place. You have to have BAA agreements. They have to
right,
be able to handle PHI. So you can't just go out there and connect to any open AI APIs
mhm,
just to propel your product. You have to be very conscious of this stuff, and when you do this, and make sure you do risk assessments on these companies, because the big boys like OpenAI, if you're not paying, that means they can take the data that you're using and do whatever they want to. So you
right.
have to use their paid version to have that, to meet your regulatory obligations.
Yeah, and then I have to wonder how much of that is actually still sacrosanct and protected. I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, you could always have that argument, but go ahead. Yeah.
Like
So
I'm
you were
paying
going to
Google.
speak on.
I'm paying Google, and I know they're making very good use of my data.
They just
But
have their tentacles in so many different
oh
avenues
man,
from all their
oh
products.
oh
So it
yeah,
might not be from what you're paying for, but something else.
yeah.
That's how Google probably gets you. But I love
So
Google. I have no problem with Google.
So the
FYI.
one thing, this was an eye opener for me, and that is this whole. So I'm thinking about OpenAI as this enormous juggernaut, and others, and Gemini's coming along bit fast, right?
Right.
And I think we talked before that that if you want better writing, I go with Anthropic. So there are lots of different, and then there's Perplexity, and et cetera, et
Right.
cetera, and then all the coding apps, and so. But I was having a conversation with a senior exec at a health plan, and they're creating their own LLM.
Okay.
And this makes a ton of sense for a couple of reasons. One is because the AI stuff is oftentimes open source, right?
Right.
So that the engine of AI is open source, or
Right.
engines are open source. So you get the engine, and then you have it in your own facility, and then you lock down your data, and you build your own LLMs, and that protects your intellectual property in a way that having it through OpenAI does not. And
Right.
so this way, if you've figured out how to process claims better than somebody else, then you don't want that data in OpenAI's or anyone else's hands. You don't want that in other data center. You're also not beholden to whatever OpenAI or the AI vendors' business models choose to be. Right now, you get these things you get a certain number of transactions for free, and for $20 a month, you get a fair amount. You get a lot of stuff, right?
Right.
But once they get you hooked on using it, like the example I had with a buddy of mine the other day was, I'm paying $20 a month for OpenAI for ChatGPT, and and uh, it's worth $200 a month,
Right.
right? Easy, right?
Likewise. Yeah.
Right? $200 a month. It's probably, I'm not going to say what it's probably worth, but
Don't
I
give
don't
them
pay
any
that.
ideas.
Right,
Don't give
right. I
them any
know. But
ideas.
there's going to be a day not that far down the road where they're going to say, it's not $20 a month anymore, Brendan. It's 200, and then it's going to be 400, and then it's going to be right. And you're still going to go and the health plans are looking at it and going, I don't want to be on the hook for this. Like, the example would be like Epic, right? Epic is, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but it's if it's not a monopoly, it's pretty good. It's pretty amazing, right? And so, if someone like if hospital systems a long time ago looked at this and said, "Oh, I like what they're doing. We're going to build our own Epic, and we're going to make it open source so that everybody adopts it," then
Right.
then you'd have this connectivity among all the different hospitals, and as they merge, they could communicate information back
Maybe
and
they
forth.
should do that.
And,
Yeah.
but now they're all hooked to Epic,
Yeah.
and so Epic, I Epic's not cheap. I don't think it's like $20 a month.
Yeah. I'm sure it's not.
It's not.
Yeah. But to your point, I think you're right, but you did say it was a health plan, and I feel like they have more resources in terms than a startup or even like a growth stage health tech company in terms
Oh,
of
for
building.
sure, for
So
sure.
I was more referring on along the lines of a health tech startup is probably going to use more likely to not use an API or something like that. But
Unless they've got like real serious money. They get venture
yeah,
money.
of
They get
course.
real right. But if you're an established health system like a Hopkins or a Mayo, or I'm sure they're creating their own LLMs.
And the thing, I'm really, if they are, I'm mad because, and I'll tell you why. It's because it's expensive, right?
Yeah,
Even the model is open source, right?
yeah,
But you still have to have the expertise, have the developers to develop it,
right.
and you can't just use your developers who are developing, traditional apps that we see today. Because
Oh, they're
now,
not
again,
smart
you go
enough. Is that
back to bias
you,
testing.
you're saying that they're not smart enough?
I'm saying this is a skill gap, just like it is with cybersecurity. You wouldn't trust your cybersecurity guy to build your apps. So why would you trust your developers to secure your systems? That
Yeah,
always blows my mind. That's
yeah,
the point. Now I have some idea of it, but
yeah.
I'm going to tell you, you don't want me developing your
Oh, I know.
application.
Believe me, you don't want me. You don't want me. What's the old cartoon of the joke about the guy that uh, works in a robotic factory, and there's a guy and a dog, and the job of the guy is to feed the dog, and the job of the dog is to make sure the guy doesn't touch any of the equipment in the factory. Like
I don't know what show that is.
it's like a cartoon, but the whole point is we get these robotic factories, they don't need people. And so you just need a dog to manage that any person that gets in there doesn't touch anything. And the only person that needs
Okay.
like, I don't know. It's like, anyway.
Yeah, but so I guess
Well,
the point I was just getting at is I'm mad because the money that it takes to really build a team and do that we were talking about this yesterday. The total cost of ownership is not just buying the model; it's the resources, it's the return on how long it's going to take for the
100%
ROI, all
right.
that stuff. So
100%
it's
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I guess the point I'm just trying to make is I feel like a health system needs to spend money elsewhere,
Yeah.
security
Yeah.
versus spending that money there.
Yeah.
As far as that's concerned. But yeah, man. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. It's just this whole AI thing and breaches. I guess it does make me feel good that you are seeing it because you're a little bit more on the front lines than I am,
Yeah.
and seeing really these providers scrutinize health systems.
Yeah.
That's a good sign. This is what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Based on the current administration's plans to deregulate AI and make it, not put a lot of restrictions in place, do you think that is going to curb the health tech companies from actually doing security, or do you think security will still we still will see an increase in the due diligence on the health systems side to make sure that their products are secure, or do you think the
Uh,
administration's regulations
at,
are going
at
to
the
kind of
risk
diminish
at
that?
the risk of sounding cynical,
Uh-huh.
uh, I think it's a function of enforcement. Like
Okay.
if there's a feeling that that we're going to enforce regulations and we're going to enforce proper behavior, then I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a greater likelihood that health systems and health plans will invest seriously in that. That said, I think they're investing. They think they have to for lots of reasons, because they do bank on their reputation and so forth. Health systems, I think, and they don't want to pay huge fines if they don't have to. And I don't think Whitty wants to go in front of Congress or the Senate, or where it was the Congress, and get grilled over Change Healthcare and United's involvement in that thing. So I think there is a significant rigor when it comes to security.
Regardless,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
when you mentioned going in front of Congress, I was thinking, well, couldn't that argument be, that the regulation it's been deregulated, so we just did, what regulation said.
yeah. Oh, well, there's certainly
You
that.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
They're kind of using it as a scapegoat
yeah,
because it's been deregulated. They're saying, oh, well, we did what it said we needed to do, but we
yeah,
got breached. So,
yeah,
so it's kind of a
yeah.
gray area. I
Yeah,
just want to know
no,
your thoughts on that.
I think that's a legitimate concern. I don't know how that's going to play out. Um, uh, it's one of those. It's almost one of those things. Like, what's the cost of doing the security versus what's the cost of not doing it and then having to pay something later?
Right.
And God, you have to hope that the cost of doing security, is not so great, and the cost of the penalties that come with failure are great enough that they go, you know what, we can't we
Right.
can't sustain this. We got to invest in security. We got to invest in, just
And,
like they
and
have to invest in tools, like other tools.
right. Right. And my last thing I would leave everybody with
Yeah,
is that one of my clients, their good friends, had built some product. This was
yeah,
in the past year.
yeah,
Got hit with ransomware. Right.
yeah.
Went belly up.
Oh
Went
yeah,
belly up. And I think what they asked in terms of ransom, it was big enough to where it hurt. But what
yeah,
really sunk in is when everybody else started, the regulatory started coming into play,
yeah,
customers started coming into play, and it
yeah,
just grew so big, the financial repercussions, that they just said, we can't do this anymore, and they filed
yeah,
for bankruptcy. And
yeah,
that company
yeah.
actually caused, what was it? I think Comcast recently to pay a fine. It was
Oh,
them.
oh wow.
Yeah. So man, and I never knew I was so close to something like that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
So it does happen, man. And to your point, I think that's the consideration, right? Whoever going to hit you with, most likely, let's call it ransomware, right?
yeah,
Whatever they're going to ask, they're going to make sure that you can pay, but it's not enough to bankrupt you, so you do pay. But then you also have to think about those other repercussions about, customer lawsuits, regulatory lawsuits, and that's where really, that total cost adds up. You might think it's worth the risk, but at the end of the day, you really didn't calculate, what it was really going to cost you,
well,
and
here's the
moving
thing. I
forward.
mean, one of the articles you sent was, and well, I think it was Change, and I think also the one at the NIH.
Yeah, with the patient death. Yeah,
Well, right, and in both those cases, they paid the bill, and
right.
then they still kept the data, and they still leaked the data after that, trying to get more. And then Change came back and said, we're not going to pay again, because one of the
Yeah,
entities paid, right,
yeah.
and then they kept, like like when someone does that. I mean, once they have the data, what's going to keep them from from
Releasing
spreading
it
it
anyway.
again, right? And
So
so
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
you have to assume that your data is going to be out there. So behave yourself.
So one of the things, with it is, when ransomware came out, it's really like honor amongst thieves,
Yes,
right? So
right.
they all, essentially, all the hackers have this understanding, and it's a code, like, if they give the money, you have to give the data back, because
Yeah,
if we don't do that, then nobody's going to ever pay the ransom.
right.
But you do have these one-offs, as you would do in any type of business, right? Where somebody always breaks the rules and then makes everybody else look bad. But you don't hear about that too often. And Change Healthcare was one of the cases. What I heard was it was like a third, like it was there were hackers who had the ransomware and they
Right.
sold it to a guy, and the guy who actually broke into Change Healthcare, when the ransom was paid, it was paid to the bigger, let's call it the parent hackers, right? And they didn't pay the middle guy. So that's why the middle guy was like, I want my money, you know, because I did it or whatever it was. And then that's why they requested more money, because he didn't get paid. So it's something, you know, it's something along those lines. So it wasn't just a blatant, you give me the money and oh no, I'm not gonna give it back. I want more money. It was something between them that the hacker.
But wasn't the NIH one the same way? Didn't they do that too, where they paid but they still leaked the data?
I don't know about that one. I just know what really stood out to me on that one was that a patient actually died because the ransomware shut down all the systems and they couldn't get care.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's not gonna be the last time we hear about this.
No, because ransomware is, when you hear about a breach in the news, 90% of the time it's ransomware, and that's what it does. It shuts down everything, so you have to pay up, and so that's what we're seeing. And you know, that's, it always messes up care. So I'm sure we'll see more, you know, patient fatalities because of this, which is like a terrible thing.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, we beat this one up, did we?
We did, man. That was a good conversation. It was really good. Yeah, it was.
So next week we're going to have Marcus Finley on, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have Marcus on, and we're going to talk about AI and health tech and moving quickly. So
that'd be fun. Can't wait.
All right, man. Have a good week. You good?
I'm good. Hey, and everybody, thanks for watching. We appreciate it. Tune in to us next week. Brendan just dropped the details, and see you next time.
Yep. All right. See you, folks.